15. So, how do we justify what we are doing now? Breeding men without choice, and without freedom to fight and die for us. When do the means cease to justify the end? Where is our society heading? Where are our ideals, and what are we without them? If we give in to expedience in this way, where do we draw the line between ourselves and those we find unacceptably evil? I have no answer, Masters, do you? Jedi Padawan Badan Jusik, addressing the Jedi Council. Etain joked involuntarily, as if falling in a dream. She opened her eyes and stared straight ahead. "He's dead," she said. "Who is?" Daman had been watching her meditate, worrying what might happen to her in the coming battle, afraid both for her and because of her. She could be either a liability or an unimaginable asset. What's wrong, Etain? Nina caught his eye with a look that suggested he thought Daman was being too familiar with an officer. Whatever she had ordered. Then he went back to checking his datapad. Gutane, she rubbed her forehead, and looked defeated. I felt it in the Force. Fi looked about to say something, and the tin silenced him with a frown. Daman gave both of them a shut-up look. There was a way of saying unpalatable things to people, and Daman thought it would be better coming from him than from his comrades. Hoken would have found him sooner or later, he said. If the Reek Rays managed to mislead him about our true target, he's at least redeemed himself a little. "Da," she said. It was shockingly familiar, the squad nickname for him. I killed him as surely as if I'd cut him down. You told us yourself that he was a rapist, Fi said, sounding irritated. The world won't miss him. Shut up, Fi, Daman tried again. It'll save lives in the end. Yeah, ours, Fi said. Daman twisted around angry. I said shut up, didn't I? Nina stepped in. You can both shut up. He said. We're all tired and we're all testy. Save it for the enemy. Daman swallowed a sudden and unexpected desire to tell Fi to lay off Etain. And in no uncertain terms, Fi knew nothing about her. Nothing. Daman was ambushed by a split second of protectiveness, and was immediately embarrassed by it. He turned back to her. He's right. It's one's life for many. Means justify the end, right? Etain stood up from her cross-legged position in one movement. And what about you? What happens if I send you or Fi or any of you into a situation where you're going to die? She was genuinely upset. He could see it in her face, and in the way she'd held one thin, scratched, bony hand clenched tightly into a fist. He stood up as well, walking after her as she headed for the edge of the coppice. "We were all made for this," Darwin said. It was true, wasn't it? He wouldn't exist at all if it hadn't been that someone needed soldiers. Utterly reliable soldiers. But it didn't feel that way right then. Her reaction told him he was wrong. And suddenly he saw Calscarata in tears, a drink in his hand. "You poor boys. What sort of life is this?" "Etain, we all do what we have to. One day, you really will have to give an order that's going to get some of us killed. Us, soldiers, troopers, whatever." "Perhaps, but the day I can accept that without being diminished by it is the day I am not fit to be a Jedi." "Okay," he said. "I understand that. How do you feel when you kill?" "I never had time to think about it. On Geonosis, they killed my brothers, and they were trying to kill me. They weren't like us." "So, what if it was someone you knew?" "But you didn't know, Gutane, and he isn't like you. Or me, come to that." Darwin hadn't a clue what she was going on about. She was new to killing. It was inevitable that she'd have a few problems dealing with it. "Etain, this squad needs you to be sorted and alert. Think about that." He turned and walked back to where Nina and the others were sitting. It seemed too obvious to replace their helmets and discuss privately whether the Commando was going flaky on them. She wasn't giving orders anyway, but a simple glance could convey a great deal. Darwin hoped Phi understood that his fixed stare meant lay off. Apparently, he did. Phi made a quick palms-out movement with his hands as if in submission. The subject was dropped. Nina was right. They were all afraid by the last few days, hovering on short fuses. They busied themselves checking and rechecking weapons. "We've never fought as a squad before." They were probably all thinking the same thing. Darwin took the hydraulic ram apart and reassembled it, then checked the hand pump for pressure. It came with an assortment of claws, and at least having the original plans and specs of both buildings meant he knew which ones to leave behind. It could exert 8 metric tons. So if the charges didn't get them through the door, the ram would. The hand-operated ram was lighter to carry, but packed less than half the punch. He'd have liked cutting equipment too, but he'd opened steel blast doors on Geonosis with thermal tape charges, and the ribbon version was even more powerful. Explosives moved at 8,000 meters a second, enough to slice through steel. Rapid entry didn't get much more rapid than that. This wasn't a silent job. It was an application of force against an enemy who knew they were coming. "Whoa, receiving," Nina said. He shoved his helmet back on his head in a hurry. Darman could hear the blip of the alarm from where he was sitting. Janot's got the remote cams in place. He was looking at something only he could see, and judging by his quick head movements, it was interesting. Darman and the others followed suit. What are they doing? A platoon of tinnies was marching down the track from the villa and into the facility. There appeared to be some urgency in their pace. It looks like they're going back to the laboratory. The remote was looking down on the scatter of small structures around the former farmhouse. It didn't have a complete view of all the approaches to the building, but it did look out on both the front path and the land to the rear. It had no view of the rear slope of the roof or the land immediately at the back. There was a man in armor very similar to their own, standing with a familiar helmet tucked under one arm. He was middle-aged, and his hard face and confident attitude said clearly that he was a Mandalorian. It had to be Gez Hokan. Darman heard the collective holding of breath in his helmet comlink. Hokan was talking to a Trandoshan mercenary, making short stabbing gestures with a finger pointed at nothing in particular. He was agitated, but in control. He was marshalling troops. Yeah, da? I think that's exactly what they're doing. Looks like he's making some last-minute changes. Why would they be doing that? Darman said. But he had an unpleasant feeling that he knew. Because we've been too clever by half, Nina said. Fairfeck. Goutenay did his job all right. Too well. What would you do if you thought you were really facing two squads? Assume two separate attacks were really possible. A tin made a noise that sounded like a controlled exhalation. Oh well, we were going to meet the whole Tinny family sooner or later. Plan see anyone? They waited, standing in an awkward group. Within half an hour, they would know if Janot had managed to get a remote cam close to the Nemodian villa as well. Darman felt a hard rap on his back plate and jerked around to see Etain standing with her hands on her hips. Looking anxious. What's got everyone upset? She asked. Come on, I felt it. What's gone wrong? Darman took off his helmet. Goutenay did a pretty good job of convincing Hokan we were targeting the villa, but we'd overplayed our hand by hinting that we had another squad. Why? It looks as if Hokan thinks one squad will be going after each target. So our chances of getting most of the droids in one locations have taken a bit of a tumble. Etain raked her fingers through her hair and shut her eyes. Time for a rethink, then. Darman replaced his helmet to watch the feed from the remote. Then the second cam came online. There was a shaky but clear view of the Nemodian villa, and its outbuildings seen from the branches of a swaying tree. A wide path stretched away out of shot from the front of the house. At least they could now see the size of the problem facing them. If Hoken tried to move Uthan, they had a high chance of spotting her. But whichever remote view Daman switched to, there were an awful lot of droids. Okay, Nina said. Fi, you take the first watch on the remotes. I'm going to see if we can get some backup. Majestic should be on station by now. We were ordered to keep calm silence until we needed extraction, Daman said, looking at Etain. Commander, Nina said. We've taken out the comm stations. They can't intercept our signal. Etain didn't even pause. Sergeant, you go right ahead and call up Majestic, she said. Ask for whatever help you think we need. Vi held up one hand. Hey, we might have a break here. Check out the remote at the villa. Daman switched channels with a double blink. The display in his HUD showed him a shot of a young boy in a scruffy smock, walking around to a side door at the villa, a fruit-laden basket clutched in both arms. He knocked, and the door was opened by a droid. The youngster went in. There was something familiar about him, even though Daman had never seen him before. He had a very characteristic walk. Tinnies wouldn't have sent out for fruit, would they? Fi said. The kid's gait reminded Daman of an old woman he'd recently slammed up against a barn wall. You've got to hand it to Janat, he said. She's certainly got guts. Let's hope she manages to get that fruit into the cellars. Let's hope she comes back out, Etain said. Dr. Uthan appeared to have forgotten that Hokan had hauled her across a desk by her collar, at least for the time being. She sat in one of the beige brocade chairs that really didn't match her utilitarian office, listening to him with apparent patience. This is an unprecedented opportunity, she said at last. Hoken agreed completely. I realize that you haven't managed to create a delivery system for the nanovirus yet, but I think we might be able to help with that. Inhalation will work, yes. Could we introduce it into a sealed room? He had ideas for ambush and entrapment. Can that be done? It's one of several vectors, she said, and skin contact, too. But that isn't quite what I had in mind. Which was a live subject. I would like you to take one of the clones alive. That wasn't quite what I had in mind. I tend to have problems with the alive bit. Not my forte. You can't simply spray this agent around, Major. I told you we haven't ironed out the genome specificity. I have droid troops. While rust might be a health issue for them, I suspect that viruses aren't. Having a live test subject would almost certainly enable us to achieve weaponizations faster. If you allow me access to the nanovirus, I'll do what I can to save one for you. Uthin shook her head. Her vivid red and black streaked hair was scraped up in a tight bun on the top of her head, giving her an even more severe appearance. Not a wisp of hair escaped the top knot. I can't do that. While you might be an expert in combat, you're not a microbiologist, nor used to handling hazardous substances. This is far too dangerous a pathogen for you to use at this stage of its development. I'm also not prepared to expend what limited samples we have on a risky counter-assault. Hoken knew he could have taken it by force, but it would have been pointless. She was right. If the virus wasn't in a state that could be weaponized, it was a long shot compared to the proven weapons he had at his disposal. Pity, he said. I'll endeavor to learn more about this technology after we've dealt with the current difficulty. So what happens now? Sit tight. Stay in this suite of rooms with your staff until further notice. What do we do if shooting starts? The same. What if they get through your defenses? They won't. But if it makes you feel safer, I'll provide you with hand weapons for your personal protections. Uthin gave him a regal nod of the head and reached for a pile of notes. Then she went on reading, pausing occasionally to write something in the margins of the papers. Despite the brief showdown earlier, she didn't seem afraid of him in the least. Perhaps working with deadly organisms on a daily basis gave her a different perspectives on threats. Something highly effective, please, she said as he turned to leave. Commanding Officer Majestic, the voice said. That was fast position. Nana couldn't get a video image on his HUD, but the sound was crystal clear. That's a negative on the extraction for the time being, Majestic. Requesting gunnery support. Say again? We'll be needing gunnery support. It might get a bit hectic down here. 100 droids. There was a second or two of silence. Omega Squad. Be aware that it might get busy up here too. We have a Techno-Union vessel standing off our port bow. Is that a negative, Majestic? No. If we cease firing, though, it may be because we are repelling an attack ourselves. Understood. Coordinates uploading now. On receipt of code, Greenwood. Direct cannon at this location. On receipt of code, Boffin this location. Enemy now has no comms apart from droid networks. Repeat, comm disabled. Knock yourselves out. Received. My, you've been busy, boys. Standing by. Omega. Niner shut his eyes and felt the relief fled through his stomach. He wasn't exactly sure how they were going to deploy Majestic's massive firepower, but at least they had it to fall back on. Are you making this up as you go along, Sarge? Vi asked. You got a better idea? I meant the code names. Yes, classy. And I meant it about the better idea. Vi drummed his fingers on the thigh plate of his armor. I wish Scarata was around. What was it he always said? Turn the problem upside down. See it from the enemy's perspective. Ethan glanced up, now a sure sign that Junot was approaching. They seemed to share a kind of radar. The Garanin slunk into the laying up point and swung her head around. Daman and Phi gave her a mute round of applause and a show of thumbs up. Nice job, ma'am, Daman said. Amazing deception. Thank you, gentlemen, she said. Uthan is definitely not in the villa. And your device is now sitting in Ankit's wine cellars. Between a case of vintage Naboo Tarul wine and a crate of thermal detonators. When you're ready, you can give Krilola its own asteroid belt. That'll make their eyes water, Fi said. And ours if we are too close, Nana said. So what now? Let's do what Scarlata taught us. Turn it upside down. The holotrot plans of the facility once again hung in mid-air as a squad. Etain and Genots sat around it, seeking inspiration. Is this how you plan operations? Etain asked. It's not meant to be like this, no. You gather intel and then you plan and execute. This is what Scarlata called a self-adjusting screw-up. When the problem actually provides the solution to another problem, it's there. All we have to do is work it out. Nana didn't mind admitting it was more guesswork than anyone should have indulged it. But then he'd been on 2 real missions now, and they'd both been the same. They hadn't known what they were going into until it was too late. Intel. It was all about having reliable intelligence. There's 3 things you should never believe: weather forecast, the canteen menu, and intel. Scarlata said soldiers always complained. Nana was not given to complaining, but he was definitely not satisfied with the situation. This wasn't what special forces were best designed to do. They should have been there to gather intel themselves, identify the target, call in airstrikes, and maybe recover hostages or data. They might even carry out assassinations. They weren't meant to be artillery and infantry as well. If the Republic hadn't wanted Uthan alive, they needn't have been here at all. Majestic could have targeted the facility from orbit, and everyone would have been home in time for supper. Nobody would have needed to get their backsides shot at, or spend days hauling 45-kilo packs across farmland. I'm glad you're not just accepting this, Etain said. Vi shrugged. If you can't take a joke, you shouldn't have joined. I didn't join, Etain said. At least they all managed to laugh. It was the first time that anyone had found any humor in the situation. Apart from Phi, of course. "What do we normally do?" Darman said suddenly. "How do we normally take a target? Break it down?" Nina concentrated. "We isolate a target, go in, and neutralize it." "Okay, say we don't fight our way in." "Not with you. We are expected to pull off a rapid entry and fight our way in." "What if we fought our way out?" Darman prodded his fingers into the hologram. "Can we get in under the facility to the central room?" This plan only shows drains. The bore's too narrow to get a man down there. And this really isn't a job for Janot. The Koranin twitched visibly. "I wasn't offering, but if there was anything I might do..." "You've done more than enough already." Damon tilted his head this way and that, studying the plans. "The main drains chamber is nearly 100 centimeters wide here, though. It only tapers to 30 centimeters at the wall. Is there any other way of getting into that main?" "Short of walking up to the wall and digging under it like a Gadan in full view of the droids, no." Jeanette sat upright. "Gadan warrens? They tunnel, don't they?" "Everywhere. They even cause subsidence." "Are there tunnels around there? Could we locate them? Would they be wide enough?" "Yes, they are warrens because it was once a farm site, and Gadans like eating berries. The tunnels can be quite wide, and I can certainly locate them for you. In fact, I will lead you through the ruins. You might have to excavate some of the way, though." "Basic SEPA procedure," Damon said. "Except we don't have proper equipment. So we'll be digging with these." He took a folding sharp-edged trowel from his belt and trenching tool, also used for freshers apt. "What is it between you and the Gadans?" Eating asked. "Why do they avoid you and your scent?" "Oh, we eat them," Janot said casually, "but only if they try to approach our young." "That's it then," Daman said. "Get me into that central chamber from below, and I'll work my way out through the facility." "Take Atin with you," Nina said. He didn't want to say, "in case you get killed," but he wanted another technically minded man in there to lay charges and blow doors. "Vi and I can lay down fire out front and deal with any droids we see. When you bring Uthan out, Etain can help us get her clear, and then you blow the place. Then we do a runner for the extraction point." "Gets my vote," Etain said. "You okay with that, ma'am?" Etain nodded reluctantly. "If that's plan C, it sounds as impossible as plans A and B." She patted Damon's arm, not quite focusing, as if she was lost in thought about something. "But I don't have a better suggestions." "Okay," Nina said. "Everyone take a stim now. Be ready to move out at nightfall. We've got 4 hours to prep for this. I'll notify Majestic. What if this fails? Etain asked. They'll send in another squad. And lose more men? She shook her head. If it's down to me, I'll happily give the orders for Majestic to pound this facility to dust, with Uthain inside or not. Do you think we're going to fail? Etain smiled. There was something mildly unnerving about the way she was smiling. No, I don't. You're going to pull this off, believe me. Nina kept a tight grip on his breathing. If he gave the slightest hint of a sigh of doubt, they'd pick it up. It was crazy, but as Karata said, they went where others wouldn't and did what nobody else could. And fighting your way out from the heart of an alloy-plated, heavily guarded facility designed to be impregnable to any life form certainly lived up to that boast. For some reason, he felt fine about it all. You're going to pull this off, believe me. He wondered if his thoughts were actually his own, if Etain was influencing his mind to improve his confidence. That was okay by him. Officers were supposed to inspire you. Right then, he didn't much care how she did it. 16. What do I think about it? I don't know, really. Nobody's ever asked me for my opinion before. Clone Trooper RC 5093. Retired at CF Velt Center, Coruscant. Chronically age 23. Biological age 60. An autumnal mist had settled over the countryside. It wasn't dense enough to provide cover, but it did give Darman a sense of protection. He tagged behind Atin as Janot led the way. He was a walking bomb factory. Why was he even worried about being spotted? The ram and its attachments clunked against his armor, and he adjusted them. Fearing discovery, Atin walked ahead, these held in both hands, with his finger inside the trigger guard. A small but significant expression of his anxiety level. Mate black armor, Daman said. First thing we ought to slap in for when we get back. I feel like a homing beacon. Does it matter? Does to me. Duh. It's one thing for the enemy to spot us coming. It's another thing entirely for them to do anything about it. Atin was still checking all around him, though. I was knocked flat by a round, and it didn't penetrate the plates. Atin had a point. The armor might have been conspicuous, but it worked. Darman had taken a direct hit too. Maybe in the future, the sight of that armor alone would deter enemies. A touch of what Scholar called assertive public relations? Myth, he said. Won almost as many engagements as reality. Darman was all for a little help from the myth department. They were 400 meters southeast of the facility. Jeanette stopped in front of a gentle slope and thrust her head through a break in the foliage. Her sniffing was audible. "We enter here," she said. "There didn't even appear to be a hole." "How do you know what's in there?" "I can detect solid surfaces, movements, everything I don't need to see." She sniffed again. Or at least Darman assumed she was sniffing. It occurred to him that she might have been echolocating. "Do you want to stand here and present a target all night?" "No, ma'am," Darman said, and got down on all fours. Jeanette might not have needed to see, but he did. He could have relied on the night vision's visor, but he felt the need for real, honest light. He switched on his tactical spot lamp. He switched it off again fast. What's wrong?" Atin asked. "Nothing," Darman said. It was natural not to like confined spaces, he told himself. With the light projected forward, he could see just how suffocatingly small a space he was in. With his night vision in place, he was simply looking down a narrow field of view. Safe inside his armor, cocooned from the world in a way he was not only used to, but actually needed. Get a grip. He could hear the sound of scurrying farther ahead, but it was moving away from him. His peck caught the roof of the tunnel, occasionally scraping loose soil and stones. The warren had been excavated by thousands of small paws, circular in sections because Gadans obviously didn't need as much floor space as a tall human male. Darman almost felt that his hands and knees were against the sides of the tunnel because of the curvature of the floor, like negotiating a chimney when rock climbing. At times, he felt he was losing his orientation and had to shut his eyes and shake his head hard to regain accurate proprioceptions. "You okay, Da?" Atin asked. Darman could hear labored breathing in his helmet, and he thought it was his own. But it was Atin's, bit disoriented. "Let your head drop and look at the floor. The pressures on the back of your neck is going to make you feel giddy anyway." "You too, eh?" "Yeah, this is weird. Whatever we inherited from Django, it wasn't a love of caving." Darman let his head hang forward and concentrated on putting one hand in front of the other. He switched to voice projections. "Jeanette, why do such small animals dig such big tunnels? Have you tried dragging a whole Merle or back home from dinner? Gadans work as a team. That's what enables them to take prey that many times their size. A point, I think, that would not be lost on men such as yourselves." "On the other hand," Atin said cautiously, "you could say that sheer numbers overwhelm strength." "Thank you for that positive view, Private Atin. I suggest you select the interpretations that inspires you most." They didn't talk much after that. As Daman progressed, sweating with the effort, he was aware of a particular scent. It was getting stronger. It was sickly at first, like rotting meat, and then more bitter and sulphurous. It reminded him of Geonosis. Battlefield smelled awful. The filtration mask was active against chemical and biological weapons, but it did nothing to stop smells. Shattered bodies and bowels had a distinctive and terrifying stench. He could smell it now. He fought down nausea. Fierrek, Etten said. That's turned me off my dinner for our start. We are near the facility, Janot said. How near? Daman said. That odor is seepage from the drainage systems. The pipe work is local unglazed clay. Is this all we can smell? Said Daman. Oh, I imagine it's also the Gadans, or rather their recent kills. They have chambers where they amass their surplus. Yes, it's an unpleasant stench if you're not accustomed to it. She stopped unexpectedly, and Daman bumped into her backside. She felt surprisingly heavy for her size. That's good news, because it means we're near a much larger chamber. Daman almost felt relief that it was simply rotting meat, although that was bad enough. It wasn't his meat. He crawled farther, encouraged by the promise of a bigger space ahead, and then his glove sank into something soft. He didn't need to ask what it was. He looked down despite himself. In the way of men exposed to memory triggers, he was immediately back in training, crawling through a ditch filled with nerf entrails. Skarada running alongside and yelling at him to keep going because this was nothing compared to what you'll have to do for real, son. They called it the sickener. They weren't wrong. Fatigue made nausea inevitable. He almost vomited, and that wasn't something he wanted to do in a sealed suit. He fought it, panting eyes shut. He bit to the inside of his lips as hard as he could and tasted blood. I'm okay, he said. I'm okay. Atten's breathing was ragged. He had to be feeling it too. They were psychologically identical. You can straighten up now, Janot said. Daman flicked on his spot lamp to find himself in a chamber that wasn't just larger. It was big enough to stand up in. The walls were lined with what looked like tiny terraces, spiraling up around the chamber from the floor. There were scores of 20-centimeter tunnels leading off them. This is where the Gadans retreat if rain floods the Rorin, Janot said. They're not foolish. I'll thank them one day, Aten said. How close are we to the drain? Can you locate it? Janot put a paw against the wall, where there were no tiny escape tunnels. The Gadans know there's a solid structure behind this. She paused. Yes, there's water trickling back there. The soil feels a meter thick, perhaps a little more. Daman would have removed his helmet, but thought better of it, and settled for letting his pack drop off his of his shoulders. He took out his entrenching tool and made an exploratory stab at the chamber wall. It was about the consistencies of chalk. Okay, I do 5 minutes. Then you do 5, he said to Etienne. Me, Jeanette said, but Domin held up his hand to stop her. No, ma'am. You better go back to Nina. We're on our own now, and if this all goes wrong, he'll need your assistance even more. Jeanette hesitated for a moment, then raced back up the tunnel without a backward glance. Domin wondered if he should have said goodbye, but goodbye was too final. He planned on coming out that front door with Etienne and Uthen. He scratched out a guide of circle with the tip of the tool, and hacked into the hard-packed soil. It felt like slow going, and he was surprised when Etienne tapped him on the shoulder and took over. A man-sized hole began to emerge. Should we shore this up? Domin said, wondering what he might have to sacrifice as a pit prop. We should only be going through it once. If it collapses, after that, it's too bad. If we have to blast our way in, it might collapse. Alternative exit. You want to be pursued through those tunnels. They'd fry us. One flamethrower volley, and we'd be charcoal. Etienne was slowing. Domin took the other side of the opening, and they worked together, removing progressively damper and darker soil, flattening out the sides of the excavations so that they had access to drill through without having to lean through a short tunnel. It was weakening the integrity of the soil wall. Domin willed it to hold together until they were through. Maybe he should have brought Etienne. She could have held the wall with that Jedi power of hers. Suddenly he realized that he missed her. It was amazing how fast you could form a bond with someone when you were under fire. Etienne's tool hit something that made a distinctive chink noise. Drain, he said. Drill time. A few quick rounds from the D's would have blown a good-sized hole in the thickest clay pipe. It would also have brought down the chamber roof. Domin suspected and summoned a lot of droids. It was time for the slow, quiet route. A hand drill was part of their basic rapid entry kit, and they each took half the rough circle, drilling at 5 centimeters intervals around the circumference, starting from the top. It wasn't until they got down to the bottom that the ooze started appearing from the holes. It had taken them an hour to excavate and drill. Domin couldn't stand the sweat trickling down his face any longer, and took off his helmet. The stench really was worse than ever. He shut his mind to it. Etienne took a swig from his water bottle and held it out to Domin. Hydration, he said. 5% fluid loss stops you thinking straight. Yeah, I know. and above 15% kills you. Daman drank half the bottle, wiped the sweat away, and scratched his scalp vigorously. Another thing to tell Ruthana's geeks when we get back. Up the temperature's conditioning in these suits. He lifted the ram and took a side-on stance to the disc of clay pipe, visible through the soil. He gripped hard, fingers tight around each handle. He had to swing carefully this time, or he might collapse the pipe. Ready? Ready. 1, 2, 3. Daman grunted. The ram hit with a couple of metric tons of force, and the perforated sections fell inward as a waterfall of stinking dog slime shot out and splashed across Daman's legs and boots. "Oh, that's just great," he sighed. "Definitely matte black next time, okay?" Aten took his helmet off, and Daman realized he was struggling not to laugh. Now that the drain was open to the air, it was a perfect conduit for sound to the building above. Aten put his hand to his mouth, bent over slightly, and appeared to be biting down hard on the knuckle plate. He was actually shaking. When he straightened up, tears were streaming down his face. He wiped them away and gulped then bent over again. Daman had never even seen the man smile. Now he was in hysterics because Daman was spattered with the accumulated waste of total strangers. It wasn't funny. Yes, it was. Actually, it was hilarious. Daman felt his stomach begin to shake in a completely involuntary reflex. Then he wasn't certain that it was funny, but he still couldn't stop. He shook in painfully silent laughter until his abdominal muscles ached. Eventually it subsided. He straightened up, inexplicably exhausted. "Shall I let Nina know we are through?" he said, and they both managed to stay completely calm for a count of 3 before the hysteria overtook them again. Once you knew what laughter really was, and what primitive reflex triggered it, it wasn't funny at all. It was the relief of danger past. It was a primeval, all-clear signal. And that wasn't the reality of their situations at all. The real danger was just starting. Daman suddenly his usual self again, replaced his helmet and opened the comlink. "Sarge, Daman here," he said quietly. "We're into the drain. Ready when you are." 995 set up the EREB repeating blaster half a kilometer from the front of the facility. That was pretty close. If anyone had spotted them, they weren't reacting. Copy that, Da. Nana checked the chrono on the forearm of his left gauntlet. "Can you see the drainage cover yet?" The comment crackled. Nina was yet again faintly pleased with himself that he decided to take that trip to Teklet. They'd never have stood a chance of pulling this off in calm silence. There were too many unknowns to do it by op order and couldn't sync. I just followed the trail of crud and there it was. Diamond said, Want a look? Nina's HUD flashed up a grainy green image of huge dripping tubes. There could have been a click ride or just a centimeter. Come to that, it could have been an endoscopic view of someone's guts. It didn't look like fun. Either way, what's above you? Dirty square plate, and it's not a drain. The water's feeding down here from other pipes. The image jerked as Darman's head lowered to look at his datapad. It threw up eerie ghost images of the building. If they stuck to the blueprints, then this is a hazmat filter, and the maximum containment chambers are above it. There was a scrapping noise. Yeah, the serial numbers matched the schematic. If they had to hose down after a mishap in there, this is where the screened water or solvent would come out. Are you going to need to blow it? Well, it doesn't look as if I can unscrew it with a hairpin. It's permeated in place. It's not the sort of thing you want coming loose, I suppose. Good timing for a spot of pyro at the villa, then. Let's sync that up. Okay, give me a couple of minutes to set the charges. 2 minutes was a long time. Nana counted it down in seconds. He was aware of Etaine's pacing up and down behind him, but he didn't tell the commander to pack it in and stop fidgeting. He focused on Five, who was kneeling behind the E-Reb tripod, checking the sights, utterly relaxed. Nana envied him that ability. His own stomach was churning. It always did on exercise. It was much worse now. His pulse was pounding in his ears and distracting him. Darman responded 11 seconds late. All done. I'll count you down. We're moving back out of the drain now. If we bring the outer chamber down, then we might take a little time to work our way back in. What's a little time in your book? Maybe forever. It might kill us. Let's avoid that, shall we? Let's. Etienne was hovering at Nina's shoulder. He glanced at her, hoping she'd take the hint. You've never worked as a complete team before, have you? She said unhelpfully. No, Nina hissed, and withheld the ma'am. You're going to do fine, she said. You're the best trained, most competent troops in the galaxy, and you're confident of success. Nana was close to responding with a few words of pithy, her tease. But he suddenly saw her point. His stomach settled into a peaceful equilibrium again. He could hear Darman clearly. His drumming pulse had faded. He was perfectly content not to think how she had achieved that reassurance. In 10, Darman said. He still had his forward helmet cam patched through to Nina's HUD. He was scrambling through a tunnel. Nina had a sensation of rushing down a flume, and half expected to splash into a deep pool at the other end. 5. It went dark. Darman had his head tucked into his chest. 3. Nina felt for the remote detonator. 2. Go, go, go. Nina squeezed the remote. For a fraction of a second, the landscape was picked out in brilliant gold, silent light. Nina's anti-blast visor kicked in. Then the ground shook, and even at 2 clicks, the roar was deafening. It seemed to go on for several seconds. Then he realized he was hearing 2 blasts, one at the villa and one below the facility. As the fire blazed and clouds of amber-lit smoke whirled into the air, the droids on watch outside the facility started reacting. Hold fight, Nina swallowed to clear his ears. Dar Atin, respond. Was that us or you? Both. You okay, Dar? Teeth are a bit loose, but we're fine. Nice job. With the custom ordnance, you two. I think the villa's got a new indoor swimming pool. The chamber's holding down here. Just about. Going in. Silence had fallen on the countryside. It was as if everyone was waiting for the next move. Fi moved the 5-pack of energy cells clips a little closer to him. Nina aimed his Ds to get a better view of the front of the villa, and saw droids milling around and an Umbaran officer with binocs scanning left to right across the fields. Ready, Sarge? Rate 1. A few more droids came out of the farmhouse door. If Nina hadn't seen the plans, he would never have believed what was concealed inside and beneath the convincingly shabby wooden siding. Eating stirred to one side of him. Ma'am, you might want to duck and cover. I'm all right, she said. She looked longingly at the Trandoshan's concussion rifle. Let me know when I'm needed. Darman's voice cut in on the comlink. We're about to enter the drink cover, he said. Time for distractions, Sarge. Got it. He knelt beside Fi and touched him on the shoulder. Put a couple down a little short of that barn. Just to say hello, then fire at will. Fi hardly moved. The characteristic rump of the energy cell was followed by a ball of fire and a fountain of splintered wood. The barn rained back down, burning as it fell. Oops, Fi said. It got the droids' attentions all right. 6 formed a line and began marching down the field. Fi opened up. Nina could feel the roar of noise in his chest as droids' shrapnel rained down on them, and incoming fire risked over their heads. A large chunk of metal flew in an arc. Nina heard its fizzing in the air as it cooled while it fell. He didn't see where it landed, but it was close. His night vision saw the sprays of shrapnel as brilliant, white, irregular raindrops. A few tinnies were getting through. Nina picked off 2 with the grenades. The next rank of droids advanced. Fi was firing in short bursts. Nina picked off whatever was still standing. Hot metal shrapnel continued to rain down on them. At the Arab's rate of fire, he was going to run out if he simply hosed them, and they were only minutes into the engagement. They dropped around 20 droids. That meant 20 more inside the facility at least. Then the tinnies stopped coming. The field fell silent, and it rang in Nina's ears as loudly as the cacophony of battle. I hate it when they work out what's happening, Fi said. He was panting from the effort. That'll sit tight. If it's just 20 or so in there, I say we go in now. Let's make sure we haven't got guests arriving, Nina opened. The long-range comlink. Majestic, Omega here. Over Majestic. Receiving you, Omega. That was some fireworks display got trade for us. Majestic, extra target for you. Have you got a visual between targets? Greenwood and Boffin. If you've got a remote, you can patch us into. Nana slipped off his pack and took out a remote, releasing it into the air. Droid's estimated strength no more than 50. If they're heading towards us, do me a favor and spoil their day, will you? Copy that, Omega. Sitrep. We've breached the facility, and we've got 20 or 30 droids and an unknown number of Rets holed up in there. Say again? 2 of our squad are inside. Ingress via the drainage systems. You guys are off your repulsors. The thought did cross our minds. Okay, some fireworks coming your way, Omega. Be advised, we still have a Techno-Union vessel standing off, and we're expecting a response when we train the lasers. Watch how you go, Nina said. Omega out. Apart from the ticking of cooling metal, it was silent. Even the chatter and whistling of Kurlora's nocturnal species had stopped. Smoke was billowing across the field from the wrecked barn. "You're okay, ma'am?" Fi said. Nina glanced around and expected to see Etain in some state of distress, but she wasn't. He was kneeling in the grass, alert, as if listening to something. Then another huge explosion shook the ground to the north. She closed her eyes. "Ma'am." She gave a little shake of her head, as if loosening stiff neck muscles. "It's fine," she said. "It just took more out of me than I imagined." "What did?" "Diverting all this debris. Droids make a terrible mess when they explode." Nina hadn't a clue what she was talking about. It was only when he turned around that he saw the meter-long jagged sheets of metal right behind him. It had almost given him an unwanted haircut. Etain managed a grin. "Can you open doors as well, ma'am?" Nina asked. Darman and Tin looked around the plastoid-lined chamber and decided not to remove their helmets. "This is one way to find out if a nanovirus can breach our filtration masks," Etain said. Darman checked the cupboards, looking for booby traps and other surprises. "I don't feel dead yet. Anyway, They don't leave this stuff lying around. It'll probably be sealed in something. He checked the room. It was exactly like a medic's stations on Commando, except it was completely constructed from plastroid ceramic. Some of the cupboards had transparent fronts. He could see racks of vials in them. In the middle of the room, there was a separate sealed booth, running floor to ceiling with a glove box in it. It was empty. There was also a refrigerated cabinet full of flasks and small boxes. He had no idea what might be what might be live virus and what might not, and what might be the lab's technician's lunch. And he wasn't going to open everything to find out. This was another case of using P for plenty. Seeing as they are not helpful enough to label this stuff with a skull and crossbones, I'm going to set an implosion device in every room, to be on the safe side. He ran his hands over the walls, testing for signs of metal substructures that might block his signal. The HUD showed 0 from his glove sensors. He checked his comlink to be sure that he could get a signal outside. Darman here. Anyone receiving over. Phi here. The inner chamber's clear. I'm setting charges, and then we're going to move out into the rest of the building. We're approaching the front. It's gone quiet out here, and we think you've still got up to 30 tinnies for company. Is that you shaking the ground, Majestic? Good to know the Navy's here. Leaving the Helmet Comics channel, by the way, make sure you leave us your visual feed. We'll let you know if it spoils our concentration. Stomach out. He gave Etin a dubious thumbs up and took the implosion charges out of his pack. He could improvise most devices, but these were specials guaranteed to create such a high temperature fireball and shockwave that they would destroy not only everything standing in a half-click radius, but also every microorganisms and virus as well. They were disappointingly small for such massively destructive power, a little smaller than the average remote. Darman still had 2. It was overkill, and overkill made him feel safer. He picked up the lidded boxes in the refrigeration unit and tested each for weight very carefully before finding a lighter one that suggested it was half empty. He set it on the table, held his breath, and eased the lid off. It held a few metal tubes with sealed caps and enough space for one of the devices. He placed the thermal carefully inside and replaced the container. Go, careful, Etin said, indicating the boxes. I will. He found another lightweight box and peered inside. There. And if they get to searching, they might even stop after they find one device. He closed the refrigerator door. That won't reduce the blast any, will it? Etin asked. Not so you'd notice, believe me. Time for the tour of the building then. There were status panels to the right of the door, set to warn some monitoring system if the chamber was opened, and a hand-sized button marked emergency close. A smart precaution if you were handling deadly viruses. Opening the door would advertise the fact that they had gained entry to the building. Atin moved in and carefully unclipped the control plate. He took out a disruptive device about the size of a stylus and held it just clear of the exposed circuits. It's much the same technology as a mini EMP, only with a less powerful electromagnetic pulse. Nobody wanted a full-strength EMP going off a few centimeters from their HUD, hardened or not. Next Big Bang, Atin said. Then they might think they've just taken a hit. The ground shook again, and Atin touched the mini EMP against the control panel. Status lights winked out. The door gave a sigh as it lost its safety vacuum seal. A thin vertical gap opened in the smooth ceramic. Sound now filtered in from outside. Explosions, shouts from officers, the occasional monotone response of tinnies. He stood back and gestured to Darman. The gap was big enough to admit a flat endoscope as well as the claws of the ram. He slid the probe cautiously through and checked the image. It was receiving. The corridor lights were flickering. There was no movement. I'll force the doors, and you stand by. I'll be ready to lob in an EMP grenade and a flashbang. Both, Atin said. Yeah. I don't want to raise any, either. But we've got rats and tinnies out there somewhere. Daman wedged the ram's claws into the gap and locked the bars in place. It was more awkward to configure it as a spreader than as a simple ram. But he didn't want to blow it open. He pumped the ratchet handle first furiously. An 8 metric ton force slowly pushed the doors apart. Atin checked outside with the endoscope again, then stepped through the opening with his D3s. Clear. Daman dismantled the ram and hurriedly hooked it back into his rubbing. Room by room, then, killing house time. That was something they'd done many, many times before. Each time they entered the killing house on Commando for an exercise, the walls and doors had been reconfigured. Sometimes they knew what they were going to find, and sometimes it was like a real house clearance. A sequence of nasty surprises that they had to take as they came. But there was a lot more at stake now than their individual lives. Atin gestured left. The inner corridor was a ring with doors leading off it, and a single passage to the front entrance. At least there were no stairs or turbolifts to cover. They moved almost back to back, pausing at the corner to slide the endoscopic probe out far enough to check. Oh boy, Atin said, just as the first droid swung around and blasted. Daman heard the clatter of metal feet from exactly the opposite directions, and for a frozen moment he found himself staring down his scope at a very surprised Umbaran officer. Daman fired, So did Atin. They both kept firing down their respective ends of the corridor. Okay, Plan D, Atin said. Nina, we are pinned down here. Over. We are concentrating fire on the front, Nina's voice cut back, and with a background of explosions both near and farther away. That was why Daman didn't like having a four-way open comm link during an engagement. The noise and chatter were overwhelming. They've pulled back inside, but nobody's coming out. We haven't located Uthan yet. Can you hold the positions? Can you see where we are? West side corridor, left of the entrance. Atin emptied a clip into two droids that came around the corner. Then there was no noise, except for the respective panting. Da. Still here, Nina. Back to back with Atin. He waited and stared down the polished hallway. 20 meters ahead. There were two doors on the right. Unconventional hinged doors. He glanced up at the ceiling to locate the emergency bulkheads. One was on the other side of Atin, and the next was between them and the inner chamber. If those were activated, they'd be cut off on both sides, boxed in and waiting to be picked off. And then anyone could easily enter the biohazard chamber and defuse the implosion device. It seemed that someone had the same idea at the same time, because there was an whoomp noise, and then the quiet whine of a small motor. The bulkheads were descending from their housings. Atin, chamber, now. Daman yelled, even though he didn't need to, and they both sprinted back towards the chamber. The bulkhead was down to waist level when they reached it and skidded under on their knees. It sealed with a clunk behind them. It was suddenly so silent that Daman knew another bulkhead had closed somewhere along the ring, sealing them in. There was the sound of a door unlocking manually, a real clunk-click noise, and then nothing. Start again, Daman sighed. Let's see what's around there. Atin moved forward and edged out the scope. He paused. He sat back on his heels and shook his head. Show me, Daman said, and switched his HUD to the scope view, expecting disaster. I think it's called irony. Daman crawled up to him and patched the endoscope into his own helmet. Yes, irony was a good word for it. He almost laughed. Between the corner and the next bulkhead, he could see two doors, one closed and one partially open. Someone humanoid, was peering around the edge of it. Women don't have look different, don't they? Atin said. That's the most amazing hair I've ever seen. Daman agreed. They hadn't seen a lot of females in their lives, but this one would have been memorable, even if they had seen millions. Her blue-black hair was streaked with brilliant red stripes. They were trapped with Dr. Ovelot Krail Uthan, and she was clutching a Verpine shatter gun.